For the first 8 months of 2025, adult fiction sales were down 5.5%.
For all the effort and all the expense that one puts into self-publishing a book, it is a little depressing to think the odds are you will sell 250 of it.
Yes! Hey there, and welcome to Pub Crawl, a podcast about the agonies and very occasional ecstasies of self-publishing. It is Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. Today's episode, Self-Publishing, The Ugly Truth. I'm Ezra Palmer, the author of the novel Catbirds and the proprietor of Taganrog Press, and I'm joined by my co-host Dan Greenberger, the award-winning writer and author of The Boys Next Door, a novel about the Beatles. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Ezra, I'm very excited about this.
You sound excited.
I am hopped up on caffeine and ready to go.
I'm glad. Well, we've overcome so many mishaps and mistakes over the last 2 weeks. It's pretty amazing that we're laying any audio down today. I haven't been behind a podcast microphone in about 5 years, and the technology has changed, and I'm thrilled to be doing this and sharing some information and laughs with you as we go.
Well, I've never done a podcast or hosted a podcast before, so you're one step ahead of me. So I'll be looking to you for guidance. No pressure.
Well, all the mistakes that I make, then you can follow my lead.
Perfect.
I know, Dan, you have created some surprise content for me because we just love that kind of surprising content here at Pub Crawl. Already, I'd say that's really what we're known for. But I wanted to drop a little surprise question on you. And
yes, please.
It's not to answer the question right now, but to think about it and to discuss later on. So here's my question for you. I believe you brought out your book. I had forgotten, but it actually came out during the pandemic
I
went back to look.
Right.
So it's been more than 5 years now. And users could go to the site on Amazon and see you actually have a ton of reviews. You have a ton of feedback from users on Amazon. I guess I haven't looked at your pages on Goodreads, but I assume that you have a fair amount of feedback there as well. And I don't know what your sales numbers are. And I'm looking forward to actually, hopefully you'll be willing to share some sales numbers with us later on in subsequent episodes. But the question is more of a general one, which is, it was an expensive process. It was an involving process. It was probably something fun to do during the pandemic, although you were working throughout the pandemic. The question is simple. Don't answer now. Would you do it again?
Okay. I'll think about that, but I'm pretty sure I know how I'll answer it.
I think I know how you'll answer too. So I wanted to put it out there. Let me just segue very briefly to an email that I received a couple of days ago. My own book only came out about, a month and a half, 2 months ago. And the feedback has been, it's okay. I think that I saw all the feedback that you got on yours, and I thought, I can see how this works. If you do some marketing, if you do some selling, if you reach out to a lot of the people that you know in the industry or people that are sort of adjacent to the industry, I can imagine that there'd be ways to move forward with this. But the fact is that your book is very cleverly pitched to an audience that I think is obsessive about the topic that you're writing about, which is the Beatles, whereas mine is about grief and unhappiness. And oddly enough, there doesn't seem to be kind of a built-in audience for that. However, I did receive this note out of the blue, a very complimentary note from someone that I didn't know saying how wonderful the book was. And he ended with saying that he had a reading group that he wanted to add my book to, and would I be interested in having my book be a part of his reading group. And when I got to that last line, I thought to myself, well, I'm being scammed. But there was, in my mind, I knew this had to be a bot. And I looked back over the words, and it really was it really couldn't possibly have been a human that would have written these words to me. But there was a 5% part of my soul that wanted to believe that somebody who I didn't know, who I'd never heard of, wanted to add me to a reading group about, family dynamics and relationships. And I thought, well, this is exactly who should like my book, are groups that are struggling with grief and fractured families and things like that.
What was the giveaway? Because the way you describe it, it sounds like, oh, this is very nice. This is very nice. And then at some point you went, oh, maybe not.
I think it was mainly just the sense that why would you approach a writer to ask their permission to invite that person to be a part of your reading group. You could still read the book without ever speaking to the writer. You might say, we'd love to have you join us, but it just it didn't sit quite right. It just seemed slightly off. And there was a couple of giveaways in the language. In particular, the first sentence, when I looked at it more carefully, didn't say, I loved reading your book. It was more like, I loved reading the description of your book on Amazon.com. And that struck me as a super odd kind of bot-like way of constructing a sentence and a request.
Was there money involved? Was there like a pitch for money as well?
No, there was no pitch for money. It was entirely just like, it was just layered. It was just what a writer wants. It was like 14 compliments wrapped up in an extra complimentary bow. It was like the warmest, most wonderful feeling. And therefore I knew it had to be fake.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when you were telling me about it, I thought, oh, okay, I can see where this is going. There must be, at some point, they're going to say, yeah, if you just send us $50, we'll make sure that blah, 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 blah. But if there wasn't that, I mean, well, isn't it possible that there's a reading group somewhere that is just looking for writers to sort of come in and talk about their books?
Well, as I say, I did have that 5% belief that this guy, Jason Chance, really did have some kind of reading group he set up for people that are, bereaved or grieving for a family loss or going through some difficult thing. And I kind of sat there thinking, should I answer? Am I a fool to write back to this guy based on that 5% little chunk in my heart that wants to be loved by someone that I have never met before? But fortunately then Jason Chance, the guy who wrote to me, did clarify what was going on, because he sent me a second note several hours later. And when you mentioned $50, no, Dan, it was $1,400 that I could join his reading group.
All right. Well, now you've convinced me, because I was about to say, Ezra, you're so damaged. Yeah, the poor guy just wants a writer he can talk to. Who hurt you?
Well, I'm glad my suspicious nature came to fight, because I would have felt so foolish to write back. And if I did, it would have been the most unfriendly note. I would have sent, okay, so are you a bot or what? And meanwhile, if it was like a real person who was struggling with, my father died last year.
And then I get in touch with this writer. I thought he could make the pain go away.
He touched my heart, and then he called me a bot.
Oh my God! There's so many pitfalls in this business of self-publishing, and the emotional one is a big part of it.
The emotional one is huge, and I think that was, I think that's why I relied on your encouragement to me so much. I know quite a number of people who have self-published books, but you were the one that spoke most openly about it with me and was most encouraging of it to me. And also, as I mentioned earlier, seemed to have cracked a lot of different nuts in terms of reaching a large audience, reaching to people that you didn't know, and connecting with them in a very real way, for which I am extraordinarily jealous. And I think that you are to be commended. And I think there's a lot of lessons for anybody thinking about self-publishing in the way it worked out for you. I know that you didn't do this in a calculating way. You are a Beatles obsessive, and I imagine that you thought many times about doing something with the Beatles, whether it was a novel or anything else. So I think that you had an honest and authentic interest in what you were connecting with your readers with, and that was huge.
Yeah, but in a way, it really was calculated, because I knew that there are millions and millions of Beatle obsessives out there. And there are people who don't read any books other than books about the Beatles. I mean, there's that level of obsession. And there's thousands and thousands of books that have been written about the Beatles. So I just kind of knew that this was an area that there was a built-in audience. So I don't think it has that much to do with the quality of the writing. I mean, I'm very happy with how the book turned out, but I think it's the subject matter that got people interested in it. And actually that sort of leads me to an interesting thing that I found when I was looking online. I did some research, and, I found someone online who said, the advice I see over and over from successful indie authors: find an underserved niche and research what they like by reading the top sellers in that niche. Write your book to market using this research, which is good advice. But then I read a really good counter argument for that, which goes like this. Why in the world would someone kill themselves on a job as hard and famously unpredictable as writing if they're not going to chase their own dream? If you just want to get rich, there are far less painful ways to do that than writing. Financial success in writing is not the norm, but the writers who do make it most often get there by writing books they want to read. So, it kind of goes both ways. I mean, write about something that you love and something that you really are interested in. And if you're lucky enough that is an interest that is shared by many, many other people, then I think that leads you to a really good point.
I agree. And I'm sort of suspicious of anybody that says find an underserved niche, as if they're like sitting out there like garden gnomes.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And I also think that there's a reason there's a million books about the Beatles or however many there are, but that just shows that there's a large audience for it regardless. And if you can find a way to, just line up next to them and give, be a part of that group, it makes a lot more sense to me than trying to write a book about a band from the early 60s that no one's ever heard of because there's an underserved niche, to write about that particular band.
Right. But, and your book is about families. And I mean, that's about as universal as you can get. I had a writing teacher who said that is the great American topic is the family.
Yeah.
And, everybody's got one. Everybody's family is messed up in some way. And I think reading your book, I mean, that's what I loved about your book was that it was so relatable on so many levels. And just, it was like beautifully colored and shaded and all the degrees of messed upness, which were a real pleasure to read.
I think we should just pause for a moment and apologize to our readers. Dan and I will stop smooching each other very soon. We're loaded with data. But I mean, I think that we, in the spirit of authenticity, I think that both of us have been struck by each other's work for various different reasons. And that's one of the reasons that we're so happy to sit down and work together.
Right.
But thank you very much for those kind words, incidentally. That was super nice of you.
Okay, let me move on now to, I have a couple of these quiz questions for you. So let me give you the first one.
All right.
All right. And it's going to sort of the great American novel part of our show.
Okay.
Which of these books was originally self-published?
Okay.
A, Huckleberry Finn, B, Moby Dick, C, Uncle Tom's Cabin, D, The Great Gatsby.
Oh my gosh. I don't know the answer to this. I know that Mark Twain was a literary celebrity almost from the first, so I'm going to discard that one. I don't know enough about the background of Uncle Tom's Cabin. I know that Herman Melville was essentially forgotten in his own lifetime, so I'm going to go with Moby Dick as my guess.
Good guess, but I'm afraid you're wrong. And your initial dismissal, Huckleberry Finn, that is the one that was self-published. Yes, Twain had been extensively published before then, but evidently he was of the opinion that he was getting hornswoggled.
But that makes
and
perfect sense.
And he had enough of those fancy East Coast publishers, and he said, well, dang it, I'm going to do it myself. And that's what he did.
I actually, I took a trip to Hannibal, Missouri to see Twain's childhood home. And as a hot tip for our listeners, you don't need to bother. It's not really a very interesting trip to make.
Just read the books
It does make
instead.
sense to me. I think that also it ties right into our overall sense of self-publishing, which was I can pretty much guarantee that Mark Twain did not make much money from publishing Huckleberry Finn by himself because he didn't make money doing anything. He basically died broke. He was a constant failure in business, and we should all learn our lessons from that. He should have stuck with his well-known publisher and gone forth with his life as it was.
I don't know that that's really the message we want to send on a podcast about self-publishing, but if you want to go with that. No. Well, hey, we can edit that out. No, I'm kidding. No, it's, but didn't he do a lot of lectures and a lot of personal appearances and that sort of thing?
He did lectures. He was actually involved in various business enterprises that I think were almost 2A1 gigantic failures, not to say that he didn't make money, but also that he actually lost money on it. He was impecunious. He had a large family of, I think, all daughters to take care of, and his life was a bumpy road, at least on the financial side. But you'd be hard pressed to find a writer that didn't lead a bumpy financial life when it comes down to it.
And I mean, there's no question that Huckleberry Finn was his greatest creation. And, who knows? Maybe it came out so well because he didn't feel like he had to answer to some hornswoggly publisher, and he could say exactly what he wanted to say, which is a big advantage in self-publishing.
I don't want to go too far down the path with Huckleberry Finn, but I will say if he had an editor, it might have been truly, truly a greater masterpiece in the sense that the book famously turns cartoonish at the end and makes the suffering and humanity of Jim comic foil to the story. And I'm highly doubtful that an editor whenever it was published would have had the forethought or knowledge or just the mindset. It just wasn't the mindset of the time to make that improvement of the book. But if there's a failure in Huckleberry Finn, it's that. And who knows, maybe an editor would have helped that. And that goes to an item that we'll cover in an upcoming episode: finding, hiring, and using an editor to your best advantage.
Yes, absolutely.
Is our quiz from you over, or was that just a one-question quiz?
I got a couple more for you. Let me see what I got. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of self-publishing here. What is the average cost to self-publish a book in 2025? Is it A, $2,000, B, $4,000, C, $6,000, D, $8,000?
Average cost. What's the do you remember what the source of this of the information is?
I believe it was. Do you know Reedsy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Reedsy, for our listeners who are just getting started on the path of thinking about self-publishing, Reedsy is a editorial services provider that, amongst its many services, provides sort of a soup to nuts guidance to bringing a book out. So you can get an editor, get a designer, get a marketer, someone who handles all of the physical aspects of producing a book.
And so I guess in them giving this statistic, they're saying this is how much it would cost if you did it all by yourself.
Yeah. Something that I would like to talk about in an upcoming episode is what it would take to self-publish a book for essentially $0. I've been thinking about it, and I think it's possible. I don't think that I would recommend it, but it's interesting to look at it as a kind of an exercise and thinking about the values of other parts of the publishing. I'm going to guess that the Reedsy number is $4,000.
You are correct, sir.
All right.
Ding, 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 ding.
I should, full disclosure, say that I'm certainly somebody that has gone into Reedsy and received offers for services from Reedsy. And in fact, I hired an editor for a novel that I ended up not publishing myself, but have had done some work with Reedsy. And I like the editing job that he did. I will say that.
And, going to your thought about, could you do it for nothing? I think, yeah, you probably could do it for nothing. But another thing that I wrote down as I was doing research on this is somebody saying self-publishing is incredibly easy. Doing it well is very hard and requires a lot of work. And
let's give some credit to these people you're quoting. These are good quotes, Dan. Who said that?
Well, it would be nice if I had written that down, wouldn't it?
So, in other words, I think this could be something that you had perhaps said yourself.
Well, no, I definitely wrote this down. But there's a lot of websites out there on self-publishing, a lot of blogs about it, and I read a whole bunch of them and just sort of took what I could. And everybody's got an opinion, but as far as the dollar amount, I thought with Reedsy that was one that I could probably trust.
Without giving anything away, I'm going to tell you that I have spent far more than that so far publishing Catbirds. And I really have done barely any marketing of it yet either. So
yeah, and I could say the same about myself. And I did actually hire a publicist as well, which I know you and I have talked about because you have not hired a publicist, and I did. And yeah, maybe that's another one for a future episode.
Absolutely. I think that the whole question of publicity is huge, and the question of hiring a publicist who has a set of contacts and the knowledge. Let's face it, there's a significant amount of knowledge involved in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one more quiz question. Actually, I have two more.
Wow.
How many copies does the average self-published book sell? Is it A, 1,000, B, 500, C, 250, D, less than 100?
I don't want to say the cynical thing, which is less than 100, so I'm going to go with 250.
You are correct once again.
Okay.
Very good. But yeah, that's and that goes to the title of this podcast. It's like the bad news. No, what are we calling it again?
The ugly truth.
The ugly truth. Okay.
We can edit that out.
We can edit that out. Yes. Well, but it kind of goes toward the title of this podcast, which is The Ugly Truth, because that is kind of an ugly truth. I mean, for all the effort and all the expense that one puts into self-publishing a book, it is a little depressing to think the odds are you will sell 250 of it. But at the same time, there are tons and tons of success stories and people who do much, much better than that.
Yes. And I think it's a great segue. It isn't just self-published books that sell like crap. It's all books.
Yeah. Yeah.
The book publishing business as a whole is total crap. And those were the data. That's the data that I gathered for today's podcast, was to sort of gird ourselves with some knowledge about just how dreadful the publishing industry is, the question of sales, the question of readership. And I'll just throw some data out there. This is coming from Publishers Weekly. For the first 8 months of 2025, adult fiction sales were down 5.5%, and all formats were down in the physical world. The ebook segment of fiction was up a bit, 6.8%, but overall sales were down 5.5%. And indeed, in every category for the first 8 months of the year, all sales are down across. So that includes, business books. It includes religious books. It's just it's an ugly moment right now. In children's and YA, fiction sales fell 8.2% in August. So you can look at numbers across the board in publishing, and you see bad news everywhere. I read, in the spirit of you're not remembering who gave you those good quotes, I read and did not note down that book sales from PW's lists have actually essentially been flat for the last 20 years. That is to say, no more books have been sold in 2024, let us say, than were sold in the year 2000. And I think that makes perfect sense when you think about the incredible variety of media that is now available to people in their pockets via smartphones, and the explosion of social media, the available streaming media, which was just unheard of in the late 1990s. So those are all competing for your attention, and books do an amazing job of supplying something that you won't get from streaming media, that you won't get from social media, that you won't get from thumbing through the news or doom scrolling, however it is that you're consuming your media on your phone. But nevertheless, there's just so much more to compete with if you are a writer or a publisher, and it makes a lot of sense that sales may not be going anywhere but down. The flip side of that is that the official numbers don't include those official numbers from Publishers Weekly, and in fact, they're from the American Association of Publishers. Those are the PW numbers that I quoted earlier, but they don't include self-published books. And I have the most recent numbers for self-publishing come from the publishing data company Bowker. And what they have found is that there has been a very significant number of titles published, obviously, by self-publishers. I think the number has reached more than 2 million volumes of self-published. And if that's the case, if you added those on to the official AAP numbers that are published by Publishers Weekly, you'd actually see healthy growth. We in the self-publishing world are actually bolstering the publishing business and raising sales on a year-to-year basis. And I think we should both feel very good about doing this for the publishing world.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And it's, the figure that I saw, I think it was also from Bowker, the total sales of all self-published books is approximately $3 billion per year. So it's still a big, big market. It's just spread out very widely. And it's,
and you're really scooping up the vast majority of those sales.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Like $2.5 billion is all going to me. But it's like, and you mentioned, other streamable media. I've worked most of my career in television. And in the last few years, it gets me depressed about just how much, content, and I hate that word content, but there's so much content out there that it kind of makes, if everything is available, then nothing is special. And it makes it so hard for things to get noticed, even if it's, a big, TV series, movie, whatever. There's just too much of everything. And
There's too damn many people making podcasts.
well, that's absolutely right. And now look at us contributing to that problem too.
That's
But
right.
and then I remember walking into, like, without even seeing the numbers, just walking into my local bookstore and seeing, my God, there's like thousands and thousands of books. And like, how would anybody know to buy my book when there's this much choice? But I think, I always try to avoid having the old, being the old guy saying, oh, it was so much better in the old days.
Yeah.
It was definitely different in the old days. There wasn't so much content, but what are you going to do? We don't live in that world anymore, and you can either embrace it or you can crawl in a hole and say, it was better back then, and by the way, get off my lawn.
Well, I always remember I think it came from the early 80s, a Bruce Springsteen song that was the chorus was 57 channels and nothing on. It's like, whoa.
Man, those were the days, huh? Damn.
Yeah, now we only have gazillion options to entertain ourselves. And I actually, the plethora of choice, I think is a real challenge for writers, for publishers, for readers too. I know as a reader, I sort of get frozen, facing those choices and feeling like I need to sift through so many options in order to make my choices. And reading a book is a significant investment of time. So,
right.
You don't want to, it's not like choosing to go to a movie or go out to see music where you're going to have maybe a dozen options in your town. Even if you live in a town like New York and you want to see jazz, as an example, you are only going to have 12 or 15 options to see jazz on a Saturday night or whatever night it is. And it's not that hard to dig through and make your choice out of those 15. And it's only an hour or two of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so your invested choice just doesn't matter that much if it doesn't work out. And I think books are different. They're asking you to spend at least 3 or 4 hours with them, probably more. And you also have to sift from amongst 10 gazillion copies. And I don't really know. I don't know how you get around that other than doing something like writing a book about the Beatles, where you've eliminated 99% of the choice that the reader has there. They know they're going to, little did I know that there are actually readers out there that only read about the Beatles.
It's really
when you said
true.
it was like that. True. I'm sure that's true, but not occurred to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have readers of my book who have sent me pictures of their bookshelf, and every single one is about the Beatles. And, I tell them, good for you.
You should say, and you only have one copy of mine?
Yeah, but it's like, and again, getting back to TV and film, because again, that's kind of the world that I come out of. But I have friends who have written many like movies for Netflix, and they're not making very much money at it. And back in the day, again, being the old guy saying back in the day, if you sold one screenplay, you were like, you'd made it. And it was a fortune. And now you can crank them out and still not really make a terribly great living. Now, I often, as I say, get kind of depressed about this, but my wife often points out, yeah, but at least they're getting made, and we're living in a day where people can get their ideas out in front of other people. And, we should be thankful for that. And I think it's the same idea with self-publishing. It's like, 30, 40 years ago, the odds of me getting my little book about the Beatles published by one of the big publishing houses, it just wasn't going to happen. And now it can happen, and I can get it in front of an audience. And that's ultimately what I care the most about, is people enjoying my work.
I think I feel the same way too. I'm sure that writers at a fundamental level, what they want is to connect with a reader. And I want to go back now to my original question that we started with, Dan. It's been 5 years. you now have conceded, or you have copped to the fact that you spent well more than $4,000 on this project.
Correct.
You have received money back in terms of sales. My guess is that you have not recouped your investment, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, I don't think I have. Yeah. In answer to your question, yes, I would absolutely do it again. And it's been one of the most gratifying things in my life to just see the audience enjoying my work, And the other part of my background was that even before I got involved with writing, I was an actor and I was in theater. And I did so many productions where we would be putting on a play for an audience of 3 people. And there is nothing more depressing than that, especially when you're doing broad comedy. I mean, just get a mental picture of that in your head. And it's pretty grim. So for me, that, hurt me early on in a way that just give me an audience. Just please, somebody look at this thing that I'm doing. And yeah, so that has been very gratifying to see that so many people have read it and enjoyed it. And yeah, it's been a wonderful experience.
Well, when I first thought, I'm going to ask that as a kind of an opening gambit in our very first episode, and I knew what you would say, because I know how positive you have been about the experience, and you were incredibly encouraging me to do it. And all through this process, as you also know, I have not felt that way. I have felt,
well, but it's still early days for you, because your book only came out like a couple months ago?
2 months ago, yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And I did feel sort of underscoring that was getting that letter from Jacob Chance saying that I could be a part of his reading group, and just the sheer pathetic hope that I had that it was real. And so I wanted to add this. There's an addendum to that chapter. Yesterday or the day before, I received another letter from another stranger whose name is Mary, and Mary told me what she thought of Catbirds, and it was just one compliment after another, and she signed it. She's a best-selling author. I had not heard of her.
Damn.
And I thought, okay, you know what? Obviously, my name has gotten onto some list, and the bots are just they're going to come and stroke me and make me feel good and then ask me for money. And I was like, okay, Mary. All right, Mary. I've met your friend Jacob, and I'm aware of what your tricks are. And as I had shown the Jacob Chance letter to my wife, I similarly showed her Mary's letter, and she said, I think this one might be real. I think you should respond. And I thought about saying, listen, Mary, I'm up to I know what you are. You're a bot. So I looked her up, and it was like, oh my God.
She's a real person.
She's written more than 30 novels. She's published more than 30 novels.
Jeez.
Some of them have been New York Times bestsellers.
Oh my God.
And I thought, this is the biggest scam ever. She's got a whole shell of stuff that she's doing. I sent her a note, and she's so sweet. She's an older woman in her 80s. She sent me another note back. She wanted to talk about writing and the creative process. And therefore, I would just say that experience by itself, Mary, thank you very much if you're listening to this in Canada. It was an amazingly great feeling. And it was really great to hear from someone I didn't know.
That is fantastic.
What
a
great.
Wonderful experience.
And how in the world did she find the book? I have no idea.
I was going to ask that. Have you, at some point you should ask her, how did this get in front of you?
I didn't want to take any chances with her writing back and saying,
because you still think she might be a bot.
Sure, I'd say, I'll tell you for $1,000.
You're very damaged, Ezra. You gotta get over that. People are just trying to be nice.
I don't think you're right, Dan, but I love your spirit. I really do. I think that's a good place to call it.
Well, hey, you know what? I've got a really nice closing thing that I wanted to read to you.
Let's do it.
It's from an English author named Pelham McMahon. And he says, and granted, this may appeal more to people like you and I who are no longer in our 20s, but he says, as my life is being shortened day by day, and I struggle to see what I am doing, self-publishing is giving me wings to fly and a comfortable feeling that when I am gone, my work can live on, no matter what others may think of it. My voice will be heard. I mean, how great is that?
That's really great. Pelham McMahon.
Yep.
Are we sure this is a real person, not a bot?
And then he concludes by saying, "Please ask Ezra if he'll send me $50, and then I'll say something nice to him as well."
This reminds me, though, that I wanted to. I'm hoping that we can finish off each segment of the podcast with a couple of book recommendations. One, just any book recommendation that we've been reading and enjoying, and two, a self-published book. Because again, it is so freaking hard for anyone who self-publishes a book to find an audience. It'll be nice for us to spread some gold around if we can. So I have a couple of recommendations, if you don't mind me being the one who does it this week.
Sure, please do.
The first one actually is a credit to you. After when we decided to do this podcast, it had been so long since I read your book that I thought I should reread it to just remind myself, I didn't want to say anything wrong about it. And one of the things that I said wrong about it is that it's, in many ways, it's not really about the Beatles. Yes, it's about the Beatles, but it's really about a narrator and his foiled love story for a woman who is in the Beatles circle in Hamburg in Germany, I guess in 1961. Yeah. Astrid Kircher, I think, is her name. And I probably mispronounced that, and I give you all credit for not correcting me immediately. Anyway, the book led me to your book, Dan, led me to think about the Beatles. I'm not a big Beatles fan. I'm not one of those people with a big shelf of Beatles books or even Beatles recordings, but it did stir a lot of curiosity to me. And I picked up a new book called John and Paul, A Love Story in Songs. And I found it, I would have to say, I think it's probably the most interesting biography among the 3 or 4 or 5 best biographies I've ever read. I'd never thought that either John Lennon or Paul McCartney was particularly interesting in and of themselves. And it was just a fascinating portrait of two very, very talented, very, very troubled, and very, very unusual personalities. And of course, it's sort of rooted in music that we all know to one extent or another, which makes it easier to kind of grapple with the things that he's saying. So, it's by a writer named Ian Leslie, and I recommend it very highly. And I found it thanks to your book, Dan.
Well, so and I read that one too, and I would second your opinion on that. It was really, really well done, and that to me is the Beatles. It's the partnership between Lennon and McCartney, and it was golden, and everything that they did together was fantastic. And it was only when they split up, that you could really appreciate what that team together was able to accomplish.
I think it's a little bit like the team of Greenberger and Palmer. Alone, our podcasts really never worked, but when you put us together, it was like audio gold.
We are greater than the sum of our parts, for sure.
My recommendation for a self-published book is a book called Story Business by Gavin McMahon. That's McMahon, Gavin McMahon. It's a book that's been written for a business audience. Gavin is a consultant who worked with my company a couple of times to help us with our presentation skills and also think about ways to present data differently. And he's a very, very smart visual thinker, and his teams are very full of smart visual thinkers. But this book, even though it's aimed at a business audience, actually is very helpful, I think, for anybody thinking about writing, because he's so focused on the fundamentals of storytelling. He digs into a lot of different structures of how you tell stories, how you get an audience involved. And of course, in his world, the end result is a sale or a commitment of some sort on the part of a customer. But it's really not that different from getting somebody to commit to your story and follow your story through. So I think it could be useful to almost anybody. He has one thing in particular. He talks about the structure of stories as being hook, meet, and payoff. And I use that structure all the time when I'm thinking about communicating with almost anybody. And it's so simple, but a super valuable way of going about storytelling for writers of almost any sort. So that's Story Business by Gavin McMahon. I recommend it highly. All right, that's all we have time for today. Dan, thanks very much. You did a great job.
Thank you. Same to you, Ezra. It was fun.
All right, thanks. Our podcast today, Pub Crawl, is brought to you by Taganrog Press, and our fantastic theme music is by the abundantly talented Zach Palmer. Thanks again to Dan and to you. We'll see you next time on Pub Crawl. When I say hi, Dan, that will be the time to say hello. Not that probably sounds obvious, but there could be other times to
I can just see, hi, Dan. Now? Yes, Dan, now. Hi, Ezra. Okay.
We can edit that out afterwards.
I think we're going to be saying that a lot today.